Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here, day 3. I love AWE. I feel like I'm with my peeps here. This is like the coolest conference ever, so thanks again. A little bit about me. I work for Blue Origin. I'm part of a small team that's leading the way for spatial innovations that'll get us off-world. So regarding Blue and what I do over there, we are somewhat limited with the stuff we can share, and I was super excited to be invited back. So I had to come up with a presentation that played safe, so I deviated and came up with something fun and whimsical. And this is my good friend, Ali, and this is what we're going to be presenting on. It's like a conversation that we would just have together.
It's a geek conversation. That's what it is. This is a conversation for movie nerds.
Totally. Lee, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Lee Kebler. I started in the entertainment space, and now I work alongside Kathy Hackle in a new form company called Journey, where we build metaverse technology and metaverse worlds for all types of companies, brands, and that's it. Yeah, that's what we do. It's cool stuff.
Right.
Run a game studio.
Totally. Okay, so a little bit about this. Spatial computing, AR specifically, has been prevalent in sci-fi films, and something we're kind of yearning for as a people. That's really why we're all here and why we're excited about being a part of these early days. So a lot of these concepts were introduced. I don't know if they planned on having repercussions. Some of them maybe weren't that well thought out, but we're going to cover some of the more important ones today. So let's jump into it. So let's get the obvious ones out of the way. I said films we grew up with, so there's an age range of people that are in the audience and will be watching this on YouTube.
We actually bickered a lot about that.
Yeah, we did.
I grew up with this movie. You're like, well, I did.
Right.
Minority Report. I have to call this out really quickly. Minority Report. I owe so much of my career to that movie because I got in the early days of when the Xbox Kinect came out, and this was shortly after Minority Report happened, and I saw that, and I was like, wait a second, we can actually start controlling things in the gesture recognition 3-dimensional space. So I just started hacking through hardware, and that's where my career started. So I have to call that particular movie out for myself. That was huge for me.
Right, and that one scene in the center for Minority Report, I was a filmmaker and a nonlinear editor, and the way he's sort of editing reality or the future, and he's stitching it together to figure out what is going to happen is a really cool concept. Avatar and Iron Man, both chock full of AR stuff, but let's jump into it.
Let's get past the obvious
stuff. These are the films we'll be covering. So Star Wars, this is like the holy grail of AR, the hologram. I think when anybody thinks of a hologram, they think of Princess Leia telling Obi-Wan that he's her only hope.
Yeah, I can't think of anything before this that had such an impact of making the concept of a hologram really kind of stick in society, all of society's minds. It doesn't matter who you talk to. For that one moment, everyone knew what a hologram was and had this idea, even though this is technically a long, long time ago.
Right, I've heard that.
In a galaxy far, far away. It was such a future-thinking idea, and while we're not there yet, there's still so much happening to kind of get us going in that direction. However, while this is the obvious one, it wasn't the one that I thought was super inspiring.
On to that one. Holo Chess, the claymation, stop motion, superimposed chess game between a Wookiee and an android definitely had a big impact on me. And I think there were some subsequent Holo Chess games from LucasArts too.
Yeah, it really did spin off this concept of what is the future of gaming. I don't think anyone. It's important to think about this, right? When this came out, was this 1977? We're talking 2 years before the Atari 2600 hits store shelves. Arcades are starting to get really big. The idea of digital gaming isn't really there. This isn't even presented as a video game. This is just presented as like gaming in the future of a board game, and yet it's led to so much technical advancement and development just as an inspiration.
Totally. The Terminator. We're looking at like some kind of debug log output or stack trace that is placed in front of a red filter. But this was the iconic first-person view of some kind of robot or android perspective, and it has stuck. James Cameron was brilliant. I don't know if it was him or a production designer that came up with it, but this concept was definitely an important one, and I guess I was a big-time skateboarder as a kid, and I'm also a cyclist, and sometimes even making my way through the crowds of people when I'm trying to get somewhere on the expo floor, I have my own little Terminator view, definitely inspired by this, and thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts were actually on the next slide that gives the update to where this was going. I think this was from Terminator 2.
Right, so this is T1, and we're going to jump ahead to Terminator 2.
So I love this because we start getting into this like early idea of not just spatial recognition, but object recognition. This is something that we have been going and hunting towards for like really in the last 5 years. It's gotten serious, right? We're looking at this idea of recognizing a motorcycle, being able to give the vehicle information on it. And then yet, I don't know who was in the main stage yesterday, we saw demonstrations of this, but it's not a motorcycle, it was, I think, a washing machine, right? That was on like a sales floor. We look at like the facial recognition of, here's this biker guy, here's his information. Now, while as consumers, we look at this and like, yeah, we have facial recognition. We can open up, our applications and get different meshes in puppy ears or whatever. But we don't have all that extra data. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, we don't. But I'm pretty sure that there's protocols at some of our favorite social media sites that look almost exactly like this on some level, right?
Totally. And in the bottom right-hand corner with the motorcycle, you can see how the occluded portion is traced with the dotted line, and the exposed is a solid line. It seems like kind of a no-brainer, but this was 30 years ago or 32 years ago or something like that. And it was definitely on point for the way you would want to communicate this type of information. Predator. This was such a cool film when I was a kid. So thermographic view and the different types of views that the Predator had. Thermographic was the one that stood out in my mind. So when Lee and I were talking about this, we were like, is thermographic really a form of AR? I think absolutely. Sort of just like night vision goggles is a way to enhance your view. And
we went back and forth. Is X-ray vision.
Right.
There's so many like James Bond movies and things like that with X-ray vision. And we left all of that out because you gave actually really good reasoning for this. I'm going to let you go to the next slide for that.
Yeah, so when we decided to showcase films, there were a lot of films that did have AR concepts in them. But it was the targeting mechanism that the Predator also used in addition to the thermographic imaging that really sealed the deal on qualifying this film to be part of the presentation. And I remember those scenes and the way that triangle drifted in, and then his laser sight that is supposed to be what is generating that in the first-person AR view on the left there. So I'm going to quickly deviate and say that I was a huge fan of the Atari Jaguar. By any chance, did anybody? Yes, that person had one, and the gentleman in the back. Awesome. So the Alien vs. Predator came out for that, and for me at home to then switch through the different views just felt totally awesome. And my first job in the game industry when I was 19 or 20 was at Rocket Science Games on Townsend Street in South of Market neighborhood as a game tester. And sitting down the hall from me at Rocket Science was the producer of Alien vs. Predator, James Purple Hampton. I reached out to him to tell him that I'd be doing this presentation, and he said it was all smoke and mirrors. Like, I mean, you wouldn't actually be doing thermal detection of a digital object in a game anyway, but it was neat to get a little feedback from him.
It's all smoke and mirrors. It's movie magic.
Right. Okay. They Live. This was like one of the coolest films ever.
I have to go see this film. I was unaware
I can't
of this.
believe
I
you
know.
didn't
I
see
got
They
so
Live.
shamed on this.
John Carpenter film. Stan Winston, I'm pretty sure, did the special effects, and Rowdy Piper's character put sunglasses on, AR glasses, have you? And it turned the world black and white and exposed hidden messages that were everywhere. You could see Obey replacing the sign on the right, and it was a really neat design. The sign that they used, that they replaced with the Obey with the glasses on, the sign actually says, we're creating the transparent computing environment. It's very futuristic, but also sort of hinting at the overarching theme of that film.
Well, hold on. You actually gave me a really interesting tidbit on the actual Obey.
You know, thank you for reminding me of that. So Shepard Fairey, the artist, you might be familiar with Andre the Giant Has a Posse and all those stickers that have been around saying that, and his clothing line, Obey, that was inspired from Obey in They Live. And here's a shot of one of the aliens, and she's speaking into her watch saying, we found one that can see.
Early iPhones. Or iWatches, right? Or
right,
what is it?
there you
Apple
go. There's some
Watches,
predictive
whatever,
programming. Sure. I think we've all wanted watches. That's
Since Dick
a separate
Tracy.
talk
That's a
at the
whole
wearables
Dick Tracy
conference.
wearables conference. Yeah.
So Robocop, the heads-up display that Robocop had was also very important. You could see lots of different forms of input and information that's being displayed, like voice stress. I don't know why they called it voice stress. It should just be called audio capture, but somebody went with voice stress there. And we have picture-in-a-picture. We're starting to see some stuff similar to that, and I've used the Mojo Vision contact lenses that are all in green. Most of the stuff is actually capable on Mojo Vision. In the bottom, you see the prime directives, and there's an interesting tidbit that I want to mention, which is this is the only instance that I'm aware of where something is being communicated to the audience through the AR or heads-up display of the character. If you remember the film, there were the 3 prime directives, but then there was a 4th one that was classified. So only you in the audience were being shared that piece of information from Robocop's view, and I think that's kind of neat. It's kind of leveraging AR as a storytelling device in the movie.
We were talking about this last night, and this one stood out to me after I started thinking about it, because the idea is like, how did movies inspire the technology we're talking about today and what this conference is about? And I started thinking, I was like, I remember this movie coming out as a kid. I remember playing the video game, loving the arcade game. This was just such a huge a franchise at the time. And it was a look at what, for good or for worse, the late 80s perspective of what police enforcement was going to look like. And it was all about, giving police this ability to capture the data around them. And now we're having such a polar opposite conversation of, do police wear body cameras, and will they, won't they, do they want to? And this is the one movie that stands out where there was a picture of the future painted, and it was celebrated, and it was this massive franchise of like, this is what the future looks like. And then when we actually get there, now we're having all of these interesting, heated debates of, wait, do they want to implement this? This is the right thing. And I'm going to keep my personal political opinions out of it. I just thought it was such an interesting juxtaposition between the vision that was set, it was celebrated, and now, so many years later, we're debating it.
Totally. The film was chock full of social commentary. I'm a huge fan of Paul Verhoeven, who directed it. And if you remember the commercials that they had throughout the film, nuke them before they nuke you, and a similar style in Total Recall and in Starship Troopers, 2 other films that he directed that have similar style. We're deviating from the whole AR thing, but I wanted to touch on that. We're going to go to Robocop 2. You can see Robocop is performing a ricochet shot off of the wall to hit that bad guy on the left, and you can see the door, or whatever that is, the metal object, and then the human target. I thought that was really cool AR that was being demonstrated, and definitely ahead of the time.
Very ahead of its time.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the Future 2. I think when most people think of Back to the Future 2 and spatial computing, they'll think of, or they'll remember the shark jumping out at Marty. You guys remember that, right? It was kind of a big deal.
A shark still looks fake.
But there was, so maybe this is where the age difference came into play. Lee loves Back to the Future 2.
I'm the biggest Back to the Future 2 nerd on the planet.
Not Back to the Future 1. He's a Back to the Future 2
I know,
nerd.
and I get hounded for that. I do. I really do. Yeah, it was a movie that I grew up with, and here's what I liked about Back to the Future 2. It was one of the few movies at the time that portrayed the future in a non-scary way. And that,
Sort of.
as a kid, well, if you think about...
Remember Biff in the casino? Oh, that was creepy.
That was 1985. That was
the twisted 85.
That was the alternate.
Hey, it's the Back to the Future 2 Pro. Look
Don't come up here and challenge me. No, as a kid, it was interesting to see this depiction of the future and all this technology that maybe would be available one day. And it wasn't scary. It wasn't dystopian. It wasn't militarized. It was something that, as a kid, I could actually look forward to. Hoverboards, but really what got me, and it goes back to this conversation from Minority Report and controlling the screen and gesture recognition, spatial computing, was that scene with Wild Gunman in the Cafe 80s, and little Elijah Woods walks up and goes, "You have to use your hands? That's like a baby's
Elijah
toy."
Woods was in it?
He was the little kid.
God.
Yeah, I'm a
Jeez,
complete nerd. But that's what inspired me.
Notice that it's directed by Max Spielberg. That was definitely a head nod to Steven Spielberg's son.
Yep.
But to my original point, most people think of the hologram of the shark. There was actually a lot of other pretty cool AR stuff going on in the movie.
This is such a short section of the film, and yet I feel like of all of the things that Back to the Future got right or wrong, this is where they actually nailed a really good look at not only augmented reality, but what would eventually become mobile technology development. And most people forget the scene ever happened. This was sci-fi binoculars. This was how he was tracking where Marty's son would be at the right time. And as you look at this, we've got what basically is the size of a cell phone, a smartphone today, doing spatial recognition, tracking human object targets, facial recognition, and giving the exact location, distance, and all of this other area. And we often just overlook this, but it was such a really clever and sleek, and I think that's the key.
Totally.
The tech that we saw in a lot of sci-fi movies never had that sleekness that this particular scene had. And there's a lot in Back to the Future 2 that doesn't look sleek, and that's on the next slide. But this particular moment was so close to a realization of what was going to happen 20, 30 years down the road.
Totally. I actually didn't even remember this scene. Actually, I know you're a Back to the Future 2 pro, but my mom bought me the book before the movie came out. Remember sometimes books of movies that were never actually books first? They would make a book of the movie for people to read. And I showed up at the theater feeling like I knew it all. I never told you that.
No, you didn't.
I thought I would share it with everybody here today. And I didn't even remember this scene until Lee pointed it out, and it was very ahead of its time. So at the dinner table, I think Mom there hydrated a pizza, and there's some kind of Oakley Blade-looking glasses on the left, and...
But really, it's the VR aspect here. We don't actually know that it's VR in this. We never see what's inside of the goggles. And as we talk about what looks clunky in Back to the Future, their VR setups definitely look ridiculous. But as a kid who grew up in this era, this was a scene that I was obsessed with VR when I was a kid. I totally bought into the lie of the 90s that VR was coming. In 1999, everyone would have a VR headset. I bought a Virtual Boy at Toys R Us with my birthday money, so I never had an N64. I was that kid.
You still have that Virtual Boy?
I still have that Virtual Boy. It
Nice.
still works.
Very cool.
It still gives me headaches.
Right.
But I had the dream, and part of that dream definitely came from seeing this concept of, we'll all have virtual reality headsets at the dinner table, and in the last couple of years, we're not that far off, really.
Right, we really aren't, and I didn't think I'd see Pass-Through coming along to be.
No, yet we
almost a
saw
way
so
to-
much of it in the expo. It's quite incredible.
Totally. All right, so who got it right? So a lot of these concepts that we explored that were ahead of the time, we decided to circle back at the end of our presentation and go over some of the stuff that might be matching up to what we currently have. So Star Wars, the Princess Leia, that's a looking glass on the right.
I actually got to see this in the expo.
Yes.
This is very demonstration was sitting at the expo, and I went back and I looked at it, and I was just so impressed. And it really does give that sense of presence.
There are some people tapping into using this as a real-time communication. There's a Japanese researcher, Takashi Yoshinaga, who is using a Kinect camera to broadcast real-time to the looking glass. And before I go to the next slide, it's also worth mentioning Gavin Smith's work at Voxon Photonics, and what he's doing with holograms is equally as impressive. And keep an eye on both of those companies because they have really cool stuff. More Star Wars, the HoloChess. Definitely Tilt 5 is approaching that. This is some kind of HoloLens implementation that was kind of a cool proof of concept.
Yeah, the Tilt 5 demonstration.
Tilt 5 is
if
definitely
you hadn't seen it in the expo, it's this. Like, they did it. There's
Totally.
no argument about it. If someone nailed it, like, there you go.
Totally. I'm surprised that LucasArts should build a HoloChess for Tilt 5.
Yeah, I'd play it.
Yeah, I know you would. So with that plot trajectory ricochet shot, we're seeing
We go from
similar,
ominous to IKEA real quick here.
Right. We're seeing similar types of ways to measure distance. It might be kind of master of the obvious approach in the beginning with Robocop to have two squares and a straight line between them, but I mean, that's what we're going for, simplicity and generating practical information like that measuring tool.
Is there much difference to that? I mean, not much.
So with Back to the Future, we talked about earlier the auto framing and character recognition, and we're starting to see that on our mobile devices.
I liked this one because there's a lot of tech being built that is more along the side of the object recognition, personal recognition, distance, and things like that. But I like the simple idea of looking at that scene where it's like, that looks kind of like an iPhone. And then all of a sudden I started thinking, it's like, there are aspects that actually we already have. They're just sitting in our pockets, and we never make the correlation from like A to B here of like, it's not that we're that far from it. In very real ways, it's in our pockets today.
Totally. And VR, I think we all know that there's VR headsets. They're pretty popular.
So the reason I pulled this one out was because just recently, this year, using things like workspaces from Horizons through Meta, maybe we're not having conversations in VR at the dinner table, because that would just be awkward, but we are having meetings in VR. It is an active part of my day-to-day work life, especially with everyone being remote. We are in a scenario now where I have meetings with coworkers or colleagues or clients where we meet in the VR space just to keep retention of that conversation, and it brings people in a very real way together.
Totally.
And that's not hyperbole, like, we're actually doing that.
Right, and he's talking about VR, and that slide is VR, and I'm actually actively doing that at Blue Origin with AR. We have people on the factory floor in Kent communicating with an engineer at our OLS facility at Cape Canaveral, and it's really amazing that we can communicate like that.
Of course, Blue Origin has the cooler toys. It's fine.
Well, all right, thank you very much. There's a couple minutes left. If anybody has any films that inspired them or any questions.
Did we miss
for the
anything?
stuff.
What was your favorite movie? What did we miss?
Nothing that you missed. Great talk. Thanks for keeping it fun, guys.
Very welcome.
Real blast. And this is just adding to the conversation more than a question, but I was building a holographic telepresence product for a customer, and the fidelity ended up being so realistic that we were asked to degrade the image to make it look more like Star Wars. So we added a filter that kind of blurred it up.
Sweet.
And then it matched
Love
up
it.
with people's expectations.
Very cool.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Oh, never mind.
reminds me too of when you'd have computers that would do calculations too fast, so they'd add a little bit of a loading bar as well, just to give people confidence. Like it had to think about
I
it,
had to
right?
think about this, right? It couldn't go so fast.
I know. A couple of quick things I wanted to bring up to yes and everything you're talking about. For an older generation, Tron, I'm sure, would be a big influence. For me, I grew up with a cartoon show called The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest,
Yes.
which also had this like incredible,
don't
we're all going to
remember
go
that
into this
one.
virtual world together. That was a big influence on me. And then a quick thing I wanted to mention about Back to the Future 2, which is a little bit meta, not the Facebook meta, is that, of course, when the actor playing, I'm blanking on his name, playing Michael J. Fox.
Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, Michael J. Fox's father, for Back to the Future 2, of course, he didn't come back.
No,
And
but
so-
that was still no.
Yeah,
You're right,
I'm
you're
getting
right,
at
you're
is
right.
Oh my God,
they
you
had a
almost
different-
stumped him.
They had a different actor
Yes.
playing him, and they had him upside down. But it actually started this very interesting debate about digital likenesses and, what rights do you have to your appearance? And that's, of course, more and more of a discussion now as we
Right,
can do
right.
deep fakes and use avatars to make people look
Great
like other
point.
people. So just wanted
There's
to
that whole scene where Doc Brown has to pull off the
Yes.
face mask because he had a rejuvenation. He's like, I'm sorry you wouldn't recognize me. He looks exactly the
Yeah.
same.
Totally, that was really funny.
Exactly.
So we considered Tron, and also Black Hole had a really impressive computer-generated opener, and that was way early, like in the late '70s. And Daryl, digitally automated robotic youth life form with
Yeah.
the star from Neverending Story, the child star. There was a 3D rendered section in that movie that. So anyway, those were all computer graphics, like Tron. It didn't really have the spatial component of an AR or heads-up display. So we tried to focus on those, but right on. Thank you, Alex.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Let's give him one more round of applause.